Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe weekly podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast. If you're new to the show, you can find out all the details at the website, talkingjoe.co.uk. Today, we are continuing our look at the G.I. Joe Disavowed era, the Devil's Due run. And specifically, we are talking about G.I. Joe vs. Transformers, a 6-issue limited series from Devil's Due in 2003. Now, without further ado, let me introduce my co-hosts. First up, it's the world's leading Benjamin Franklin impressionist. It's a real American Autobot. It's Tim Finn.
Hi, Mark. Hello, listeners.
And assembling with the rest of us to join and form one giant Talking Joe-ticon, it's G.I. Prime. It's Jay Cordray.
Podcast combiners unite. Let's do this.
IDW has come up with sort of the canon onomatopoeia for the Transformers sound effect. IDW has been using it in Transformers comics for the last 5 or 10 years, and it's TSHE dash like that, and then those 4 letters repeated, and then dash and those 4 letters repeated. So when a Transformer in a comic actually transforms, there is a sound effect for it.
Somebody
Is it anything like mine?
Wait a minute, what's that?
Yes, you're all doing excellent versions of it.
Thank you. So before we get too far into it, a discussion prompted from SJub7 from the last podcast where we pointed out that Lifeline had a weapon, and was that an error? Tim, you said that he's a toy, he has to have a weapon or no one will buy it. Then riddle me this, Mr. Tim. What about Mainframe, who did not come with a weapon? How did that happen?
Nobody bought Mainframe.
Yeah, I bet he was a bit of a peg warmer. That's I'm guessing.
There we go. That's your answer, Stephen.
What was funny?
Mainframe sucks.
What was funny with the original line was you had some characters like Tunnel Rat, who's supposed to be in a confined space with a huge gun. I mean, his gun was like one of the biggest machine guns. In fact, I always used his gun, gun, with my rock and roll version too, because I hated his guns. But I loved Tunnel Rats, but didn't think that it worked with somebody that was supposed to be in a confined space.
Give the guy in a confined space the biggest line of the entire line. Yeah.
What is this? A cement mixer? Take it in the tunnel and shut up.
We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read.
Crashing on to G.I. Joe vs. Transformers, which ran from June 2003 to January 2004. The story was by Josh Blaylock, the pencils Mike S. Miller, inks Armando Durthy and Corey Hampshire, Colors, Link Studio with Hi-Fi Color Design. Letters, Dreamer Design. Graphic Design, Mike Norton. And cover A's generally by Mike S. Miller.
There's an added credit. The final 2 issues are written by Josh Blaylock with Dan Jolly.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. I missed that one.
It's very small on the inside cover of the issues. But please continue.
Thank you. I mean, these final issues were sort of coming out at the same time as sort of Blaylock was wrapping up his run on the main book. So maybe, it's an era where he's trying to step back and, because he had also had the with Brandon Joa in his last couple of issues as well. So maybe the same dynamic occurring there. So let's have a look at the things that are on the front of these books, which are called something.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Covers, that's right. So there are, across these 6 issues, almost 20 covers. I think issue 1, was it 8 that I said? So rather than going through each one in exhaustive detail as we normally would, I thought maybe we can talk about covers in general for these, maybe pick a favourite and discuss what makes a G.I. Joe versus Transformer cover work. G.I.J., what do you think?
Well, let's start off with number 1. The first one, and I'm going to spend more time on these because I looked at these ones more than the other ones. But the number 1, the first cover with Snake Eyes and Optimus Prime. At first, I looked at that and I thought that was kind of too dark. But then the more I zoomed in on it and kind of got to really look at the details, I was blown away by, and this is going to sound stupid, but especially like on my computer monitor, which is how I'm reading this, so I got a pretty big monitor. If you look at like the coloring and the lighting on Snake Eyes' foot, the one that's foremost coming towards us, that shoe and the sole of that shoe just is really, really nicely colored. I mean, I know it's kind of probably a stupid minor detail to get caught up on, but I thought it looked really cool. I think this one is by Miller, maybe. And I'd never, this is kind of one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is how big of a Transformers fan you are and what your exposure to the IP in general is. When I was a kid, I had a few Transformers. I had most of them probably from the first couple lines, but I only ever read the Marvel comic up to like issue 9. So I've never read any other comics, or I've seen a few here and there, and I've always been impressed with the way that some people draw the machinery and stuff. But I've just never been that big into the property after that. But I thought that first cover was real nice, Snake Eyes and Optimus Prime. The second one with Campbell, Cobra Commander, and Megatron is good. It's not great. I do love the riflings in Megatron's gun, and that's really once you get past that first cover, the second one, who is it, Soundwave, and then Destro in the background. I'm not really a big fan of how they draw Destro, and I'm not sure what I want different in that. But I've seen some people, I think Kurth maybe did that kind of effect with his head. Just not a huge fan of it. But
and we can talk about it in a bit because it's the same artist, isn't it? But he's big into kind of playing with the reflective effects.
The reflective surfaces, which honestly, I suppose that's the way you should do it. But overall the covers aren't terribly impressive. Who is the one? There's looking through the alternate ones, like with number 4, the one that's just got like the Constructicons on it, and they're huge. A lot of these shots like this, you're just really crammed in there, and it's hard to.
Yeah, it's very
sometimes
very
to
busy.
see what's going on. It's like watching a Michael Bay movie and trying to figure out whether it's Starscream or Megatron that's on the screen.
Yeah, that's a Mark Brooks.
Okay,
cover.
Yeah, Brooks. He's good. He's gotten a lot better, but even then,
a lot of work in the colors on that one.
2003 was pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts overall on the covers. What do you guys think?
The one that I was going to talk about was issue 5, which is Storm Shadow over standing atop of a defeated Optimus Prime. He's standing on top of a severed head, essentially on on the floor, and it's it's quite a cool image. It isn't reflective of what happens on the inside, but what is particularly interesting about that cover was that it was translated into a statue. So in 2007, there was a company called First Four Figures. It released this Optimus Prime versus Storm Shadow statue, 7.5 inches tall, limited to 250 pieces in the USA from Action Figure Express, and another 250 pieces in the UK at play.com. Came in 5 pieces, which were then assembled together to make the statue. And yeah, very, very cool looking statue. In the UK, I don't think there was enough demand for it, so they were selling it pretty cheap in the end. But because there's so few, nowadays I think it goes for more of a pretty penny. But yeah, just a quite cool aspect to it, really, of recreating that cover as a statue. And there was almost going to be a second one as well. That there was a Baroness and Ravage statue that was mooted based on the art to the convention edition, issue 3, with the statue actually looking a lot cooler than the cover that it related to, which looks somewhat sort of basic. But the statue that was kind of revealed but never ultimately produced did look very cool. Although, yeah, it did ultimately see release in a slightly separate toy exclusive figure. One of my friends, who's a massive Transformers fan, also produced me a piece of fan art for my birthday once upon a time, which was a kind of reinterpretation of Baroness and Ravage, which is pretty cool. So I'll ping that image across to you guys at some point.
That's cool.
So I'm going to answer Jay's question about what kind of Transformers fan I am in a minute when we get to the sort of top down of the miniseries. But I do want to talk about 2 covers briefly. One is cover B of issue 1, which Jay already referred to, the J. Scott Campbell with Andy Tong and Eric Koh cover Commander and Megatron. And then also cover 4B. So in this issue 1 cover, it's a real thrill to have J. Scott Campbell back, even if it's just for one cover and not a whole run of covers, because he's so important to the Devil's Due era of G.I. Joe comics, drawing covers for the initial miniseries and also that pinup from that issue of Wizard, which helped kick off the 2000s nostalgia boom. And not just that, he's a superstar, but he can draw a real sweet spot version of these characters that looks like they've stepped out of the TV shows. It's still a little exaggerated with his proportions, and it does, look like comics and not animation. But J. Scott Campbell really cartoons, he really caricatures. But, if you sort of can ignore for a second that he draws like babes and he draws very taut superheroes like Spider-Man swinging around, he's very, very good at drawing because he does covers and he does a lot of pinups. I think sometimes we sort of forget just how talented he is. So even though this cover, doesn't have enough story in it, there is a bit of Megatron and Cobra Commander being in opposition in this miniseries. And I don't mind for some of the covers on a series like this, them being just a sort of pinup with 2 characters, because, and this is where I'm going to talk about cover 4B, the risk of doing a cover with too many characters for a series like this is that you have 4 factions, right? Like a G.I. Joe cover can already be busy because you've got Joe and Cobra. When you incorporate Joe and Cobra and also giant alien robots and other giant alien robots, it can be hard to work in everyone in a scale that makes sense. And I speak from experience because in middle school and high school, I drew an amazing and hilarious Transformers fan fiction comic. And it's really hard when you're drawing in the scale of giant robots to work in the occasional human, because either you have to have all these like convenient, like 20-foot tall, like mounds of dirt, or if you're inside, I mean, for the humans to stand on so they can be at eye level with the robots, or you need the robots to always be leaning down to talk to the humans, or the humans are in their hands and they've brought their hands up, or you just have to deal with sort of perspective where the robot's kind of far away because we're on the scale of a 5-foot tall human who's standing on the ground. So Mark Brooks's cover for issue 3 is great because it's much more simple. There's a lot of breathing room in the background, and the colors are more flat, more like animation cell shading. The cover for 4B falls apart because in every little bit of negative space, Mark Brooks is cramming in one more Transformer. I showed this to my wife last night, and she didn't even see Snake Eyes until she'd been looking at it for a long time. And so I like the idea of a big battle between a bunch of Transformers and Joes and Cobras, but the inking isn't separating the close and far layers enough. The color isn't separating the close and far layers enough. There are too many characters, and the coloring is way too aggressive. So when I look at this cover, either just the front cover or the front and back cover together, I just see a lot of like dark and light color, dark and light color, dark and light color. I just see a lot of very busy color.
I definitely agree with that, and actually number three is probably one of my more favorite of the covers. It's definitely more subtle and helped by being a less crowded image. One of the other things that I notice about these covers is the selection of interesting artists. So particularly jumping out to me is Cordray Andrews on issue 1, who this particular image is quite sort of exaggerated and cartoony, but he's one of these artists where when he produces something, say good or bad, it will always be interesting, and it's got quite a chameleon like ability to really pull his style in completely different and distinct directions, that to the extent often that you wouldn't realize it was the same artist, and sort of very experimental as well.
Cordray Andrews is someone who can draw in a multitude of styles, and if you like this sort of cartoony reduced style he's using here, he drew 2 really unusual issues of Ultimate X-Men in this style. I think it was 23, 24 right in there, that just looked like it was a TV cartoon, and it didn't at all match the previous 2 years.
It really didn't.
And it was totally awesome. But he's drawn other series, like his Spider-Man Reign is completely different, and his upcoming Amazing Fantasy, I think, is gonna be completely different.
Reign kind of had more of a Miller Varley look to it, didn't it?
Yeah. He's someone who, you know what? Before we go down the road of an artist who did one cover for this series, I'm going to swing us back. Something else that makes it hard for the artists drawing these covers is the logo treatment. The logo
takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of space because you have to fit in 2, and the Transformers logo is really busy because it has a gradient. Now, I don't know if Hasbro said you have to use this, or if Devil's Due Press said we want to use this, but the G.I. Joe logo is legible in all these because it's never flat white, but it's got just the smallest white to light gray gradient. Imagine, everyone, if the Transformers logo was just a solid light color inside those thick black outlines. It would not be competing with all of the characters and details and color below it in most of these covers. And I go back to I've said this in many episodes before in terms of color, and also sometimes in terms of art, less is more. And just because this logo is like the original one and it's awesome, doesn't mean it's the best logo for these covers.
Okay, shall we take this point to sort of talk generally about our obviously we're all dyed-in-the-wool G.I. Joe fans, but should we talk about our kind of thoughts on or our experiences with Transformers specifically?
Sure.
Yeah, Jay, you had mentioned that you got not very far with the comic. Did you watch the cartoon? Did you buy the toys?
I had most of the toys from the first couple years. Once the movie hit, I think I had Rodimus Prime, maybe, and then maybe one other one. I'm thinking possibly Cup. But that was it. I didn't have anything really beyond that. I don't know whether it was that the movie turned me off, because I don't think it really did. I still watch the cartoon. Like, I remember lots of episodes with the Sharkticons and the Quintessons or whatever they're called. And but I mean, I think it was kind of like with a lot of other things. If you look at my toy boxes now, there might be 6 or 8 He-Man figures or 10 or 20 Transformers or something, and then there's like 500 Joes. It just was a case that I was such a big fan of Joe that nothing else was going to eclipse that. And Joe is there's a lot of fantastical elements to it, but it still can be considered real world, much more than something like Transformers would. So I think that was what really cemented the Joe brand for me more, was just that it was more realistic. I like a lot of Transformers. I just never really, I think the last comic that I read was the one with Circuit Breaker in it, and I just was like, ugh, this is garbage, and never picked it up after that.
Strong words on the end of the Wildman.
I know.
Furman Wildman run. Mark, what kind of Transformers fan are you?
Probably the earliest experience of Transformers for me were the cartoons, which would be shown on TV, on the Wide Awake Club, on children's TV in the mornings, on the weekends, and I think during the holidays as well. And that was a fairly prime time TV viewing time for the morning TV. And that was pretty much the only opportunity you would have to see the cartoons. And the toys were coming out at the same time. And I got a handful of, just probably about 5 Transformers total. My best friend, as I mentioned, Shumit, he is a massive Transformers fan. And now he's my age, and he's an artist and very, very still influenced by the Transformers. He made a giant life-size sort of Laserbeak statue that fully articulated and all of these kinds of things. And sort of, because of my friendship with him, it was a big thing, because all he wanted to do was play with Transformers and talk about Transformers. And for I was very much a G.I. Joe, Action Force fan. That was my massive thing. The Action Force comics were being reprinted in the back of the Transformers Weekly comic book, so I was reading the Transformers as part of that, and enjoying it, but really not near as much as the G.I. Joe. And once it wasn't part of the G.I. Joe experience in terms of having to buy that comic to read the G.I. Joe side of it, wasn't really seeking it out. And I think the more the more fantastical sci-fi components, whatever you would want to describe it as, probably just connected less with me. Just sort of robots, harder to I guess buy into the emotion.
It's a little harder to relate
aspect and to relate to, yeah. And I think I've always found it a little bit difficult to find a way in, because of that sort of aspect. And I've sort of read a few more comics since. I sort of picked up the first bit of the IDW reboot, which was handled well, but not a lot of those issues sort of left me completely cold, particularly like the sort of some of the standalone Spotlight stuff that they were doing. It was just I've sort of enjoyed like Transformers generally as a concept, but not quite so much a fan, particularly of the comics.
Well, it sounds like I am if we were to take your fandom, Mark and Jay, combine it and multiply it by 3, we might get my fandom. In '84, my brother and I went all in on the TV show and the toy. The animated movie stunned me and changed my life. I was the youngest pre-registrant at the first Transformers convention, and I attended all of them for the next 12 years.
Wow.
I was a dealer at the second one. I read. I got to perform with Peter Cullen in front of a big crowd of people.
Nice.
For like a convention exclusive, like 15-minute scripts with some of the voice actor guests playing their characters from the cartoon. I've already mentioned the Transformers comic that my buddy wrote and I drew in middle school, high school, and college. And even 2 months ago, I was watching the newest show on Netflix, which is good. When this miniseries came out, G.I. Joe versus Transformers in 2003, at that time I was a bigger Transformers fan than G.I. Joe fan. And if that sounds hard to believe, this isn't to say that I was a smaller G.I. Joe fan. This is to say that I was a gigantic G.I. Joe fan, and I was a slightly more gigantic Transformers fan. At that time, the interviews I was doing for my G.I. Joe book were in fact interviews for what was going to be 2 books, one on Transformers and one on G.I. Joe, because a lot of the people involved worked on both. And I should note that even though I bailed on the Devil's Due monthly G.I. Joe comic after issue 10, after the second arc, I did come back near the end of the second year for this miniseries because I was intrigued, and certainly the covers for issue 1 were really exciting. I also liked the idea that it was 6 issues, because when there had been crossovers previously with Marvel, they had only been 4 issues or 4 issues worth. So that's a good segue, and what I want to spend just a moment on, just for context for our so many listeners, is before Jay jumps into the plot, I think it's worth spending just a sentence on sort of how the 2 previous G.I. Joe and Transformers. I guess Mark can spend a moment on the third one, which is British. How the previous crossovers worked. So, in the toy lines were separate, the comics were separate, the TV shows were separate. Though there is one episode of the animated Transformers where sort of Cobra Commander shows up. In '86 or '87, the Marvel was publishing a lot of spin-offs for both of these brands. It was sort of the peak year for that. And there was a 4-issue G.I. Joe and the Transformers miniseries, which was written by like the assistant editor from Transformers and drawn by Herb Trimpe, who'd worked on both of the comics already. And it's pretty stale. It doesn't really feel like G.I. Joe, and as like fun and stale as the Transformers comics were early at Marvel, this series felt a lot like them. In 1992, the G.I. Joe comic was still chugging along, and Hasbro was about to bring back Transformers as Transformers Generation 2, which was mostly some previous toys in different colors and the old episodes with some tiny added distractions. And so the Transformers showed up in 4 issues of the monthly G.I. Joe comic written by Larry Hama to lead into the new monthly Transformers Generation 2 comic. And those appearances are weird because the editors changed, the artists changed, and though Hama brought some sort of like fun, grounded realism to these alien robots, it was also in the middle of like 3 ongoing G.I. Joe plot lines. And so it was good, but sort of odd. And then the Joes show up for like 3 pages a few months later in the monthly Transformers Generation 2 comic. Mark, can you spend a moment on the Action Force and Transformers UK stuff?
Yeah, so this was Simon Furman written series, and I think Jeff Senior art. It originally saw print across 5 issues, 1 issue of the Transformers Weekly, and then in 4 Action Force Weekly issues, and then saw a reprint in the back of Action Force Monthly / European Missions, and it was I guess probably a more English sensibility. There's some archaeologists who explore the sewers below London. They find a damaged Megatron, and then there is basically a big scrap involving the Action Force team, of course led by Flint, who's always big in these Marvel Action Force Weekly stories, along with Blades and Grimlock and this giant robot Centurion chap, and they have a big old scrap.
The 4-issue Marvel crossover from 86-87, no one in the monthly G.I. Joe comic ever referred to it before, during, or after. Mm-hmm. And there is one like oblique reference in the monthly Transformers comic around when that miniseries was being published to the events of that miniseries, and one Transformer does get killed in the miniseries and he's rebuilt, and then his new form shows up in the monthly Transformers comic after. So the term that a fan came up with, which I think is really fitting, is convergent divergent, where the universes are separate until they're not for a moment, and then they're separate again. So does that UK stuff, does it get referred to in either of those continuities after?
I doubt it, not to any important extent. You never know. There might have been an odd throwaway line here or there, but particularly maybe in this ongoing story about this Centurion character, perhaps. But as you say, sort of probably in that UK Transformers universe, some of the implications of the stories might have been ongoing. But in terms of referring back to Action Force and stuff, I don't think there was anything very significant. So yeah, as you say, sort of separate, except for this moment when they're not.
Right. Also, sorry, for context, we should also point out that at the same time that Devil's Due through Image is having a bunch of success with its G.I. Joe comics, Dreamwave Productions is having a bunch of success with its Transformers comics, similarly symbolically launched from that nostalgia article in Wizard magazine. I mean, Josh Blaylock and the Devil's Due crew showed up to one of the BotCons, one of the Transformers conventions, because of this crossover and also the crossover audience. And so around the same time that this first G.I. Joe Transformers crossover is coming from Devil's Due, Dreamwave is publishing its first Transformers G.I. Joe crossover. So as I've said before, this was a good time to be a Joe fan. Jay, do you got a summary?
Okay, plot breakdown. A group of soldiers, including Colonel Clayton Abernathy, Sergeant Lonzo Wilkinson, and the man known as Snake Eyes, have been called upon to provide security for a summit taking place in Washington, D.C., when the summit is attacked by unknown forces with incredible firepower. In the skies above, U.S. Air Forces give chase to the attackers, only to be stunned when one of the enemy fighter planes transforms into a giant robot. As the aerial robots decimate the military's planes, the enemy vehicles on the ground also transform into giant robots. During the battle, the soldier known as Snake Eyes is seriously wounded when one of the robots, Starscream, blows up a Wolverine tank Snake Eyes is standing upon. Before withdrawing from the battlefield, the unknown assailants blast one word into the pavement: Cobra. After the battle, Colonel Abernathy is briefed by General Flagg along with Officer Fairborn and Sergeant Burnett. Flagg tells Abernathy he's putting together a team of soldiers specifically dedicated to combat the forces of Cobra, G.I. Joe, and he's picked Abernathy to lead it. Later on Cobra Island, Cobra Commander is faced with 2 problems. First, he's running out of fuel to power the giant robots, and second, some of the robots are refusing to follow commands. As the Joe team welcomes a now bandaged up Snake Eyes into the fold, Colonel Abernathy attends another meeting with General Flagg, who tells him they know where Cobra is going to strike next. Elsewhere, 2 cars talk to each other. Back at Cobra Island, as Dr. Mindbender attempts to download information from one of the resistant robots, the robot begins downloading a virus into Cobra's system. Faced with losing their entire system or just one robot, Mindbender pulls the plug, stopping the download, or so he believes. General Flag and Lady J introduce the Joes to a defector from Cobra named Mercer, who tells them that Cobra's giant robots are not man-made but are actually aliens from another galaxy. Based on Mercer's information, the Joes determine Cobra is planning to hijack a satellite capable of beaming directed solar energy to Earth via microwaves to power their transformers. Cobra attack the satellite research facility but are met with resistance from the G.I. Joe team. As two Stinger Jeeps prepare to crash into the building, they are sideswiped by a race car from out of nowhere. Another robot joins the fray, seeming to help the Joes. Cobra escapes, and the two new robots, Wheeljack and Bumblebee, help the Joes decipher a message from the leader of the Resistance robots, Optimus Prime, providing coordinates to their whereabouts. On Cobra Island, the robots have woken up.
Okay, that's issues 1 to 3. And then, Tim, you take it away with a really summarized version of 4 to 6.
Jay's is really well written. Mine is just bullet points. Okay. Two generals we haven't met before show up to take over the mission. Wheeljack introduces the concept of Energon to the Joes. Megatron and Optimus Prime fight. The Joes invade Cobra Island, but the Autobots have already broken free of Cobra control and are fighting the Decepticons there. President George W. Bush launches nuclear missiles at Cobra Island, but Hawk knows that this will cause a reaction with the Energon stored there and tear the planet in half. Our heroes stop the nukes. Cobra Commander gets away with Starscream. The Autobots head back to Cybertron. In an underground base in the American Southwest, scientists are revealed to be reverse engineering the captured Soundwave.
Dun, dun, dun. To be continued in G.I. Joe vs. Transformers 2, I assume.
And there are 4 of them.
There.
Devils. So Mark and Jay, sort of overall top down, what do you think of this miniseries?
I read it in 2 separate parts. I read 1 through 3, and I loved those. I thought those were really fantastic. And then later I came back in and read 4 through 6, and they were good, but I didn't think they were as great as I liked the first 3. But there was just a lot of little things that I liked about the first 3 issues, and I especially really liked Miller's artwork in a lot of places. I think one of the big reasons why I never continued with the Marvel run is because I just never thought the artwork was that good. There was one issue in the first 10 issues that was like a Ratchet standalone issue, I think, that had really nice artwork. It was just him and Spike, I think was the character's name. But other than that, I never cared a lot for the artwork in the early issues. I really didn't like the artwork in G.I. Joe Transformers, the original one. And it wasn't until, like you said, Dreamwave started doing modern Transformers stories that I ever really thought anybody did a good job capturing the mechanicalness of Transformers. And there's some spots in this miniseries that I just think are fantastic. There's some artwork, some single images that are fantastic. I'm definitely going to point out when we kind of get to them. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed the artwork in a lot of spots. There's some spots that are rough, and it looks like there's some spots maybe with Lady J where he's used some Brandon Peterson artwork for reference, which is fine because Peterson's awesome. Yeah, but it was just really interesting to me to think, and especially one thing I wanted to ask you guys about was when this was published. I just thought it was an odd choice for Devil's Due and Blaylock to be like, hey, let's do a Transformers G.I. Joe and make it its whole separate thing, and we're going to intimately tie these two properties together as far as their origin stories go. I mean, if you were to continue this continuity, you couldn't really ever separate the Transformers out, and make them their own thing. Like you said with the Marvel run, that crossover was mentioned, maybe a line here or a line there. You just couldn't do that with this because it's too integrated. You got Snake Eyes getting deformed here. You got the Joe team getting put together. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this arc that provides the foundation for the two properties, which is an interesting way to go about it. I liked it. I just thought it was interesting. And as far as, the only other Transformers G.I. Joe I ever read was that 87 one. I did kind of want to read the Jay Lee one, but I never did. So this was an interesting second go round for G.I. Joe for Transformers for me. I didn't read the later one in the Marvel run because I already stopped reading by then.
Yeah. The original Marvel G.I. Joe versus Transformers is probably amongst the least favorite G.I. Joe comic. I found it really, really hard work to get through that. So I'm not coming from a place of massive nostalgia for pre-established high points. I think I've got a few really super high level thoughts. So one positive, Transformers as G.I. Joe vehicles is pretty cool as a concept. That's nice. I like that. It comes up with some cool, comes for some cool images and ideas. It's a separate continuity, standalone, and that's always a harder sell for feeling invested in the story. If it's a separate, standalone, limited continuity, does that mean it doesn't matter? The art's okay, no major objections per se, but it's not great, not necessarily a style I'm particularly enamored with. And for the most part, the colouring is bad, I would say, with some different colouring choices, styles, a bit more of an animated look to it. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. And the other real high level is that there is just a lot of cramming in of characters, which, again, talking about feeling invested in the continuity given its limited nature, means that you see less of characters and therefore less time to feel that kind of empathy with them. So I think just trying to cram in so much might be nice from a cool factor, but from a sort of story and feeling factor and feeling kind of a little bit more emotionally invested in the story, I think it detracts. Tim?
So Blaylock writing an all-new continuity is a bold decision that works, because rather than worry about, sort of as a reader, rather than me worry about, okay, well, let's say this was in the then current Devil's Due publishing continuity, or in sort of a nebulous, like animated Marvel Devil's Due composite continuity, and getting distracted by sort of, who knows what, like, oh, is Snake Eyes with Scarlet, or is Scarlet kind of with Duke? We're just seeing this all for the first time. Pages 2 and 3 of issue 1, so this double page splash of Cobra Commander with several Cobra soldiers behind him finding the Ark, is one of the most dramatic images of G.I. Joe mythology that Devil's Due ever created. And sadly, it's this pocket continuity that doesn't exist anymore and doesn't, quote, matter. Mark's right. Having Transformers as Cobra vehicles is really fun and upsetting, right? Like the Autobots, and to a lesser extent the Decepticons, have been violated here because they've been taken over by Cobra. Mentally, they can't control themselves. They're just automatons in the Cobra army, right? The Autobots have to do bad things because they're now tools of the villain army. But also, their bodies have been rebuilt, right? So there's an element of violation and body horror here, which I'm reading into the story that is not really presented in the story, which is a missed opportunity. But to make the Transformers part of the G.I. Joe origin, right? There's this line in issue 1 where Stalker says, "We're not equipped for this," as these reconfiguring vehicles attack some fancy outdoor event where the sort of proto-Joes are pulling guard duty. It's really powerful. I think Jay's right. The first 3 issues are great, and the final 3 issues are okay. And I agree with Mark about the art. I think Mike S. Miller does a good job on all the Joes, and his storytelling is clear. There's 2 or 3 panels that are just major duds at the end of the story. I don't think Miller is... I think he's comfortable drawing the Transformers, but I don't think he has sort of figured them out yet, because he draws them accurately, and he draws sort of their poses make sense. but there's something missing in sort of the verve, the dynamism of their poses in their heft, and to a lesser extent that challenge I was saying before about drawing a bunch of very big things in the same scenes as some smaller things, 30 and 80 foot tall characters along with 5 and 6 foot tall characters. The 2 extra issues does give this a lot more room as compared to, say, the original 4 issues from 1986. But I think what a story like this needs is to start on a smaller scale. I think it needs to, sort of in disguise, start as a solo book. I think it needs to be about one Joe and one Autobot, or one Cobra and one Decepticon for half an issue, and then open up to like more characters in one faction, and then issue 2, issue 3 open up to the larger conflict. And it's not until the Tom Scioli Transformers and G.I. Joe that's 12 issues, right? But that's a bonkers story, so that's not even a fair comparison. Mm-hmm. I don't think Hasbro or Devil Stew or Image in 2003 had any reasonable faith that this could carry 12 issues, but there's enough characters and there could be enough story that it actually needs more than 6 issues.
Yeah, I agree with those points, particularly about starting small and then growing. They sort of start big and try and make it bigger. Yeah, which sort of just loses your kind of, I guess, entry point in and connecting with a particular character, or it's a bit like the movie where they're just throwing everything at it and moving super quick, and you just don't know where. There's no kind of resting points. As you were talking about issue 1, I was sort of started flicking through that, and one thing that is a detractor for me is the Snake Eyes origin. I like a part of it. I like the fact that they're playing with this joke that they're calling Snake Eyes a chatterbox, and he's not talking because it's part of a bet. That's quite a fun kind of story aspect. But the actual scene itself of him being shot at by, is it Starscream, and it hits the Wolverine tank, but it completely misses Snake Eyes. It goes in between his leg and sets fire to his hat. It's I think, being direct, a bad panel, and particularly weighing it up against the original Snake Eyes origin story, and that we know by this point it's a difficult comparison at the best time, but to have such an important panel being carried off as badly as it is here, it's unfortunate.
So he gets disfigured here, and then it's after this that he has surgery to become Asian? Is that...
I don't think he's Asian in this book, is he?
I don't know. We don't see him afterward.
Jay is, for our listeners, Jay is saying this one day after advanced tickets for the Snake Eyes movie have gone on sale. When I read this, I was struck by how the issues don't end on cliffhangers, even very small ones. And reading
they just kind of stop.
Yeah, reading. I read. I guess I sort of read. I read them all within a day, and it reads very much like a graphic novel that has been cut up into 22-page chapters and published as 6 different issues, which is fine on its own. But when I got to the end of issue 2 or issue 3. Like the scene sort of stops and then there's an ad on the next page, and I turn the page and there's 2 more ads. I turn the page and there's 2 more ads, and I thought, oh. And considering how, 1980s and 1980s like cartoonish the stakes are at the end of the story, right? Like the island's gonna blow up, the planet's gonna blow up, there are nukes. I think Blaylock does a disservice to the creating excitement and anxiety in the reader and buyer to come back the next month and buy the next issue, in not having even small little cliffhangers at the end of each issue. It could just be one little blurb of dialogue, or I think it was issue 2 or issue 3 where it's just have add one panel where some other character shows up, and someone turns and they're like, oh no, it's you. So I wonder if this was written sort of just sort of that much more with the graphic novel in mind. And my preference with collections of comics is that the covers get reprinted every 20 or 22 pages with the original issues. And for several years, like Marvel's reprint department, and for a couple years, DC's reprint department would like inconsistently do a collection and shove all the covers at the back, which I didn't like because it feels like a weird mismatch. And I sort of wondered for the person reading this story in the paperback collection, I guess later there was a like hardcover of all 4 of the crossovers. I thought, well, in this case, it actually probably would read better if you read the whole story slammed together and then all the covers get lumped in the back, particularly since the covers are mostly just pinups, and that can sort of like lead you out of this world as you finish reading your book. But you know me, I like cliffhangers.
That's how I read it. I mean, in the omnibus format, and as you say, sort of the delineation between issues not super clear, and all of the covers stuck at the back.
Aha. Another sort of top-down comment I had here is, so Mike S. Miller, he did some design work, I believe, for Ultimate X-Men. I think he did some character design when that comic launched in 2000, and he did like a couple covers for Marvel at that time. And, you know, he's drawing in this early 2000s slick style. It's not, you know, he's not like a Jim Lee clone to me. He's not a J. Scott Campbell clone to me. And I can't quite place what his influences might be, but it does feel, you know, it's the modern, like, speaking of artists who drew 2 issues of Ultimate X-Men, Ben Lai and Ray Lai, it sort of looks like this, like, slick, hot, you know, it's not exaggerated like Joe Madureira, but it does feel of a piece with what Devil's Due was doing with its regular G.I. Joe book at the time. And issue 1 is solid and exciting, and I do like the inks in issue 1 more than, I'm sorry to Corey Hampshire, I think the inks in issue 1 are a better fit than the rest of the inks in the series. More thick lines. But when I read issue 1, I thought, oh, I wish this guy had drawn the opening arc for Devil's Due. I wish he had drawn Reinstated, because he can do more things better than Steve Kurth could at that time 2 years earlier than this. So it's not really a fair comparison. But you know, all the choreography, you know, Miller still likes like a lot of artists, like some Brandon Beddoe and like some Tim Seeley. A lot of times his horizon line is a little too high, like when Mutt and Quick Kick are running in issue 3. I think he could get more drama out of some panels if he put the camera a little lower and tipped it up. But, you know, like, he draws all the vehicles convincingly. Like, you know, the one thing that I really don't like about how Mike S. Miller draws this series is in the final 3 or so issues, Lady J is in her sort of G.I. Joe costume, and her shirt or jacket is this like bare midriff version, which is sexy and exciting, but like don't do that.
Doesn't really fit with her character,
or the series, right? Yeah. It's like, I mean, I guess Quick Kick's shirt gets like torn off him, and he's shirtless for the rest of his appearance. So I guess there's some parody there, but like no, Quick Kick is Bruce Lee. He doesn't wear a shirt. That's his costume. But Lady J, no, she wears a shirt and pants.
Yeah, she's introduced as like an intelligence officer, you know, and it's all smart in her uniform and kind of having done the detailed background and analysis, and then we flip forward and she's, you know, trying to dress up like Daisy Duke from Dukes of Hazzard. What?
Lady Duke.
But to give credit to Miller, in one last place, in issue 2, I think Jay's bit in the plot breakdown about 2 cars talk to each other. The scene where Bumblebee
just comes out of nowhere.
But Bumblebee and Wheeljack are talking to each other in vehicular mode, and I forget what. I'm sorry, Transformers fans. I forget what kind of car Wheeljack is. Alonza Racing something. But
I never knew what kind of car Wheeljack was.
he's a real car. But in that scene, Miller draws a great VW Bug and a great Wheeljack.
I'll just point out as well that although I say that Lady J is introduced as an intelligence officer, it doesn't sound like she's a very good one. From this introductory bit, she says, "Nice to meet you, Colonel. I've been investigating the Cobra organization for over a year now, in cooperation with both the FBI and CIA, looking for ties to world leaders, front companies, you name it. Part of our job was assessing the threat level, which obviously we couldn't have fathomed would be this dangerous. So your main job is to assess the threat level, and your conclusion was they weren't very dangerous. So you're going to take the lead, obviously. So maybe she is better off just sort of tying herself up."
Let's fail up, Lady J.
In terms, so here's some things that this series. Here's a thing the series gets right, and a thing the series gets wrong. Destro's introduction and his handling, I really like. He's not mentioned by name the first two times. They just call him the arms dealer, and when he shows up, there's some anticipation. He has a different relationship. Like in the cartoon, he's just sort of a nebulous, like, second in command, but that's not what he does. Here, unfortunately, in the comic, Firefly and Zartan are just two more random Cobra guys. Yeah. They don't do anything different. One's not a saboteur. One's not a master of disguise. We get a little bit of Storm Shadow being
that was
Cobra.
A missed opportunity.
Right, which is why this really needs 4 more issues. But
hey, quick question. Let me throw this in here. Do you think Zartan could change into a Transformer?
It depends on if he's using hologram technology or costumes. It depends on what continuity this is leaning on.
Like maybe one of those small ones, the tapes that come out of Soundwave. He could be one of those guys.
When Destro does finally show up, how he's calm and collected, how he's impressed and inspecting the merchandise, these alien robots that have been taken over by Cobra. I think that's a great scene, and it works really well. A thing that I don't like about this series, it gets close. So the Autobots and Decepticons have been turned into Cobra vehicles, and so when the vehicles initially show up, we're just seeing like stingers and ferrets, stuns, hisses, rattlers, and a Night Raven. When they transform, it's sort of a new body that's just sort of the colors of that Cobra vehicle with like an Autobot's head or a Decepticon's head on it. And in terms of design, that falls flat for me. And I don't know if Miller did all the designs himself or if a couple of the other artists at Devils do were like figuring stuff out before Miller started drawing issue number 1. But I think what this really needed was when, for example, one of the stingers transforms into, I guess it's Sideswipe. I need a little bit in that stinger. I need like a little bit of color, like a little bit of yellow if it's Sunstreaker, or a little bit of red if it's Sideswipe. And then when it transforms into a robot, I need it to be a little different from the neck down to say Sideswipe, and a little different from the neck down to say Sunstreaker. And that might just be like a couple panels of color. It might be a slightly differently shaped arm or leg. But what we have is like sort of generic Cobra Stinger as a robot from neck to feet, and then like plop, Sunstreaker or Sideswipe's head on it. Similarly, like, they spend some time figuring out Optimus Prime. I guess he's a red hiss who transforms into Optimus Prime. But I need a few more cues for the robot characters. It's like if you're one of the Seeker jets, you have a cockpit in the middle of your chest. If you're Optimus Prime, you have some kind of windows or windshields or squares on your chest, even if they're skinny chairs or squares or something. So in terms of design, I needed this series to go a step further.
And I think going by the bonus material at the back of my book, it looks like probably Miller did do most of the design himself. And I think, to be fair, if that is the case, and it's just a standard comics gig, that's an awful lot of design to be doing as part of a
Yes,
a
yes.
regular, a regular penciling job. It's figuring out a sort of a new robot mode, a in between transformation look. It's not an easy task, particularly if it's just on the basis of a standard page rate as well, without lots of extra payment and time to be doing all of the designing. That's going to be a team of, would it be in the Hasbro's hands? That would be a team of people over many iterations and many months, wouldn't it?
And I don't think Miller had ever drawn Transformers comics, which is its own particular challenge. The guys at IDW, before that at Dreamwave, some of the Marvel guys, drawing Transformers, it's particularly hard. It's harder than drawing Conan or Daredevil or Black Panther.
This guy hadn't done Transformers before?
No.
Wow. See, that's what I thought his strong suit was the machinery and stuff like that. Like, I'm looking through number 1, the big splash page where the hiss comes out of the truck. That's awesome, first of all. It's running people over. I'm like, yeah. But so that was really cool. But like look at the detail around the turret of the hiss tank and just little stuff like that. I thought that was awesome. Yeah. I don't think the Wolverine tank has ever looked better. The first panel where you got the planes are flying, and then I think it's Ace on the very last panel of page like 14 or 15 is like, basically, what the hell is that? And then you turn the page and boom, there's your first full shot of a robot. I was like, holy cow. I mean, to me, I assumed that he'd been drawing Transformers before, because I was kind of like, well, obviously, he's a Transformers artist. He's really good at this. This is his strong suit. The people I thought were kind of weak at times. Yeah. But I thought that his machinery and stuff was really good.
Like that shot you were talking about of the hisses coming out of the ArmaGEEKdon vans. Yeah. And, that looks cool for the most part, but the protesters kind of let it down. It's like,
everything's a little flat.
Everything and the perspective is a bit weird, and that girl down the front of the bottom left hand corner of the page that looks like she's about to be run over, and stretching out. What is going on there? It's sort of weird.
They got her in mid yoga.
Yeah, and just sort of design the look and the feel of a protesting crowd just doesn't kind of ring true.
Yeah, they're not dirty enough.
Mm-hmm.
There's one guy in dreads and stuff. He could be a protester. Beatniks.
Miller. So in issue 6, the series. I'm jumping to the end. I don't know. In issue 6, Miller makes a couple choices which I don't think work. When on the page where Cobra Commander is talking to Starscream, and then there's a big panel of Megatron sort of running at us, and it's not a splash panel because it's still 1, 2, 3, 4. There's still 4 panels on the page, but Megatron's very big on this page, and his arm sort of breaks back into panel 1, and his leg and his other arm break into panel 3, and then the actual story choreography of this page happens in panel 3, where he stops himself short. He puts on the brakes because he sees something, and Megatron says, "What is this supposed to be?" And then the next panel, we see a lineup of Joes holding just regular machine guns, and Duke says, "You're not going anywhere, pal." And we don't see Megatron and the Joes together, and it's like, wait, are there several vehicles behind the Joes? Because I don't know why this should scare Megatron, or I don't know why the Joes should feel confident. So this is a place where, and this happens a couple times in this final issue and once or twice in the whole series, where Miller, in that sort of modern comics way, picks a panel to be much bigger than the rest so he can draw a character full size facing forward, I think, so that page will sell better as original art, because it's not a page of hands and shoulders and the backs of people's heads, right? So then 3 pages later, Optimus Prime shows up, right? Megatron's getting shot by the Joes. He's saying, no, you can't do this to me. And then Prime says, Megatron. And it's just this giant panel of Prime standing there, and I don't know where he came from. There wasn't a previous panel of him driving up as a red HISS tank. So, it's supposed to be a surprise. It's supposed to be a reveal. But Prime's just standing there. He doesn't, have his... there's no pose. He's getting ready. And then there are 2 panels in this final issue. One page later, I've talked about this before in this podcast, where sometimes when artists have someone kicking straight towards the camera, it is an incredibly unsatisfying bit of foreshortening, because you just have this bottom of a foot and it's very small. And that really needs to be angled outward, if not in profile. So 2 pages after this big reveal of Optimus Prime, there's this pretty good fight between Prime and Megatron. And then there's this big sound effect, craboom, as Prime is kicking Megatron. And it's just this medium gray rectangle, which is the bottom of Prime's foot. It's what a terrible, I'm sorry, Mike S. Miller. It's not a good drawing. It's not there's no impact. There's no oomph to this Prime kicking Megatron. It happens elsewhere in the issue where a page earlier where Megatron's about to step on Duke, and it's just cropped so oddly. All I see is this gray rectangle of Megatron's foot, and I sort of can't tell what we're looking at. So I think Miller may have been a little rushed for the final issue, or the story is just sort of getting harder because a lot's getting crammed into the final couple of issues.
I thought for sure that one panel that you were talking about where the Joes are all standing in front of Cobra Commander and they've all got their guns, that was the bottom of one page. I thought for sure we were going to turn the page and they were just going to be blasting Megatron completely to pieces, like Bumblebee in the Marvel one. I thought that's kind of what we were going to have a throwback to that, and I didn't realize that this was not ending. So I was kind of this is it. They're going to blast Megatron, the end, and then no, he gets away.
Okay, here's something else that didn't quite work for me in terms of a story beat. Snake Eyes is fighting Starscream, and he shoves a grenade in Starscream's eye, and then Starscream falls off a cliff. That page, sorry, I have it somewhere in my notes. Let's pretend it's issue 5.
Yep.
That's cool. It's Snake Eyes can take down an entire Decepticon. That page lacks closure. And when I got to the final panel of that page, I was expecting to see the word boom, either as a sound effect from off panel, Starscream fell out of view and that grenade goes off in his face and he's unconscious or he's dead, or we actually see it happen. But instead, he just sort of falls, and then you keep reading the next page, and it's wait, what happened to the grenade? And then in issue 6, Cobra Commander is fleeing the island, and he runs around a corner, and he sees sort of crashed into this, the bottom of a waterfall, Starscream. And except for the weird linkage with that grenade that doesn't make sense, I like the idea that they need to strike a bargain with each other. Cobra Commander says, I need to get out of here. And Starscream says, well, I can't get this tiny grenade out of my eye because my fingers are too big, so I'll fly you out of here. I like that. But wait, did Snake Eyes put a dud grenade in Starscream's eye? If so, I feel that should be a bigger deal. Wouldn't Starscream have wouldn't Snake Eyes have turned around and gone back down there and shoved another grenade in his eye? Or if the point of this is it's perched so that if Starscream moves too much or blinks, I know he can't blink, then the grenade goes off, then that should be a scene where Snake Eyes is walking away sort of all proud, I sure showed that alien robot, and then Starscream's I can't move, otherwise the bomb will go off. And instead it's just this weird, I don't understand. It's it's missing something.
Yeah, he slashed his eye, put a grenade in there, and then did a ninja kick at him so that he fell off of the waterfall. And Starscream can't fly in his robot mode because that hasn't been established before. And so would just fall because that's what robots do, right? But yeah, I guess, is it a dud, or is it that the grenades not the way it's been drawn here. A grenade would have that handle on it, which would then ping off, and maybe that handle has been trapped by the eye. But yeah, that's sort of reading into it because it's not been drawn that way.
You mentioned that Starscream can't fly in robot mode, which reminds me, although this is a new continuity, as the regular Devil's Due comic borrows from the TV continuity and the Marvel Comics continuity, this is very much the animated Transformers continuity, because Megatron has his special purple hand replacement weapon. Ironhide speaks with a scratchy Southern American accent, and if this is the animated continuity, then in fact the Decepticons could fly in robot mode. But I'm okay with them.
I was being sarcastic, by the way, Tim. It maybe was not established that Starscream could fly in his robot mode, but Jay was talking earlier about the Rattler Transformer, whoever that is, was had a nice big splashy page of them mid-air in robot mode.
Okay, thank you. Yes. How do you guys feel about the nuclear threat of the story, the stakes, and the this idea that like the decision is taken out of Hawk's hands?
I get it, but it's weird in terms of the way they handle it, right? That they just seem to kind of give up on the idea that there might be a way of stopping the nuclear attack, and they just have to get out there and fight and disobey orders anyway, rather than pointing out to anyone that it's going to be bad news. So they find out that the nuclear attack will set off these energon cubes and blow up half the Earth or whatever it is, but they don't seem to attempt to alert anybody who could make a decision to that peril. And in particular, I don't know, there's a scene with Flag, and I don't know if he's in the same room as the president or if he's eavesdropping. It's not clear from the storytelling. Initially, when I was reading it, I thought he was in the same room as the president. And, if that is the case, why wouldn't he make an effort to intervene and say, look, maybe if you do that nuclear thing, it will blow up half the world because of this energon, so possibly not the best idea. That was the main detracting factor for me, is that they seem to give up very easily on the idea of being able to actually just not attack, just not drop the nuclear bomb.
I almost feel like the whole we have to stop or they're going to nuke the site is kind of something that's done too often, in a lot of different things. But when I think about it, I mean, just sitting here thinking about it, while Mark's talking, I was like, well, what else would we do? If we were faced, or if our government or our world were kind of faced with this sort of threat, if the robots had came out and they were just so much more insanely powerful than any of our militaries, and they were clearly a threat, if we had them all in one spot, we knew they were all there, I wouldn't necessarily say, don't nuke that island. But it does kind of feel like this is just something that writers always go back to. It's like, what are we going to do? Well, what's the worst thing we can do? What's the, and then somebody's got to prevent it. How many movies, TV shows, books can we go back through and look and say, oh, we're going to nuke this. Well, we have to get out before the nuke comes, or we have to stop this, or whatever. But, like I said, it's the greatest offensive threat that we have, and it would be used to stop what would be considered possibly a greater threat. I don't know. Are Transformers as a whole, as a collective, as a species, is that more dangerous to us from an uninformed standpoint, that we're willing to nuke something? I mean, I kind of feel like maybe we would, but also, like I said, story-wise, it seems like that's something that's overdone.
I think part of my challenge with the nuclear threat is that, Jay, what you just said, like, what would we actually do? I agree. I think even though it's overused in storytelling, I think the stakes might actually get this high, this fast.
Yeah, it's like, what other option do you have?
But in terms of this story, it's not earned. And as a comparison, I want to just draw everyone's attention to a 12-issue Transformers miniseries that IDW published about 10 years ago called All Hail Megatron, which was several years into the Transformers continuity, but it was also, if you wanted to see it as sort of a soft reboot, it was sort of a soft reboot. And in that series, Megatron conquers Earth. And it's sort of the stakes that we had always imagined in previous Transformers storytelling, comics and cartoons, where no, just one of these robots could destroy half a city, and all we have is tanks and planes, and where are the Autobots? Where are the Autobots? And that series, I forget what issue it is, but a couple issues into it, the 6 Constructicons transform and merge into Devastator. And he, I think it's San Francisco. I think he reveals himself in front of the Golden Gate Bridge. I haven't read it since it came out, so forgive me if I'm misremembering. But he does tremendous damage, and he's 3 times taller than Megatron and Soundwave. The threat in this 6-issue miniseries from Devil's Due, it's established in issue 1, where there's this protest, and there's 20 or 60 guys in green, men and women in green, who are guarding this event, and these vehicles transform and do a little bit of damage really, really fast. I think part of why a story like this has to start smaller, with one Joe and one Autobot, or one Cobra and one Decepticon, and build out, is because any one Transformer is actually enough of a worry that I think realistically the government would be man, should we nuke them? And for the story to 2 issues in, it's oh man, Reflector is here, right? If you all don't remember Reflector in the cartoon, he's the 3 Decepticons who transform into a camera. Mm-hmm. And the G.I. Joe and Transformers crossovers that IDW and Dreamwave did around this time all suffered from the writers feeling the need to, or the publishers telling the writers to include everyone because it's so cool. And then what you have is Firefly gets 3 panels to do something. Storm Shadow gets 2 scenes to do something, and so it's I feel like it's disproportionate, because the logic is oh man, these alien robots teamed up with this terrorist organization. I think we should fire the nukes, but it's also they haven't actually done that much damage. Are you sure you need to fire the nukes? And so to Mark's point, it's why isn't anyone talking them out of using the nukes? They haven't. It's not like it's not like the Cobra and the Decepticons sawed Florida off and sank it. They just attacked 2 little things. And so this is why you need more issues, you need fewer characters, and then also the bigger stakes. It's sort of the arrangement of assets is out of proportion. And there's a 5th faction that I didn't even call out. You have Joe and Cobra, Autobots and Decepticons, and then you have the brass. You have these 3 or 4 or 5 generals and the president. And realistically, they would show up in a G.I. Joe story on this scale, but I very rarely want to see them in a G.I. Joe story. It's I want G.I. Joe to handle this kind of thing on their own. It's is it Superman 3, which has the president, but is it Man of Steel and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, where we don't see the president, we just see sort of the highest ranking army guy? Because I don't want to be reminded of actual politics and the actual Joint Chiefs of Staff. I want the Joes, or Superman, to solve this problem on their own. I don't want the story to get too big.
We needed a scene of Condi Rice going, Mr. President, let's settle down on those nukes.
Yeah,
I feel like there'd be one person in the White House that was a little bit, little level-headed, and that might have been her.
Yeah, as much as I
said, as there, cowboy.
As much as I don't want a bunch of generals showing up and then the president, logic dictates we might need to see them in this particular story. But Jay, you make a great point. I don't mean this in a really damning way, but this story is sort of rushed. It happens really fast, and so like the stuff with the president and this escalation happens really fast. The same way that Snake Eyes' origin happens really fast. But you compare the pathos of Snake Eyes' origin in issues 26 and 27 of the Marvel run, and that it had already been leaning on one or two references to his face and the fact that he didn't talk and the fact that he was so loyal. And you have this like emotional heft to it. And so when it happens here, it's sort of like, it's just sort of fun, but a little empty. Like, oh yeah, Blaylock's doing his version of the Snake Eyes origin in 3 panels because of the Decepticons. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah, just coming back to my point about Flag earlier on, where do you think he was in the room where it happened with the president?
What issue is this?
This
4?
is 5. Yeah, 5.
5.
There's a shot of the Pentagon. There's a bunch of sort of generals sat around the table. To be perfectly honest, sir, the decision should be a simple one. You think that choice of whether or not to nuke an island in the Caribbean should be simple? Have you considered the fallout? We could wind up irradiating the lower half of Florida. It's not a decision we have to afford to hesitate on, sir, and the matter should end there, etc. And then there's a shot in the bottom right-hand corner of General Flag. You can tell it's Flag because he has a badge on him that says Flag, wearing his trademark sunglasses. And then the word balloon is like a kind of radio box, and he's got an earpiece. So it's a bit confusing. Is he listening in on that conversation somehow, or has he got in contact with the Joes? I couldn't quite work.
So there's a one of those phones in the middle of the table for conference calls.
Uh-huh.
So he may be supposed to be in on the meeting, but his body language here does sort of imply that he's, and there, like he's definitely in a different room because there's his name is Flag and he's standing in front of a flag. This is not a case where he's in the room, I think, but Miller didn't pull the camera back enough to show him in the room. I think this is a case where he is somewhere else completely, and Miller and Blaylock don't give enough room for us to know where that is.
Okay, so maybe he's dialed in to the teleconference where they're talking about this nuclear attack, and just does not see fit to speak up and mention a little fact, a little tidbit that might be handy to know in the decision making process, which is that if they do pull the trigger, they will blow up half the world. It could be useful to share that.
Something else which I think where the Jay talked about the first 3 issues versus the final 3 issues. I think where it is less effective for me, the plot in the final 3 issues, is that this orbiting satellite can charge energon cubes. And that feels very much like the super simple writing logic of the first season of the Transformers cartoon, which was written for younger viewers as compared to the episodes that came 2 years later after the movie. Like, the producers specifically changed that show and hired a different story editor. And you watch the first season and to some extent the second season of Transformers, and the pacing's a little slow, and they're always just talking about energy, like we will turn the ruby crystals of Burma into energy. Like, I don't know how. I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, do you eat it? Do you like mash it up and then you eat it? Do you like push it into a cube and you plug it in to your arm?
I think that's my abiding memory of the cartoon, because I've not gone and watched anything rewatched anything apart from the movie. Of just giant piles of energon being produced, and I guess coming out of Soundwave's chest. Does that sound right?
Yes, he makes the empty ones and then they can fill it. That's very much season 1. There's less of that in season 2, and I think basically none of that in season 3. But by issue 5, I feel like the integration of the alien robots and the terrorist organization, which works so well in issue 1 with this reveal, like, my God, Cobra has the Decepticon and the Autobots. Like, it's so upsetting. It's so compelling. And then in issue 5, you have sort of the grounded scene where Snake Eyes takes on Starscream, which is like a cool, badass Snake Eyes scene, even though the final bit with the grenade in the eye doesn't work for me. And in the issues 5 and 6, you have Prime like being a hero and fighting Megatron, which is something that we want to see. But there's this page in issue 5 where the satellite's shooting down energy, and there's a silhouette of Bumblebee seeing the energy come into the Cobra Island, and then there's some energon cubes, and I feel like here Blaylock is leaning too much on the animated continuity from 84 and 85, that you have this sort of this like MacGuffin science. It's like a satellite can make energy, and like the Transformers will like consume the energon cubes somehow, and it's never shown, although there's a Bumblebee reference where he says, I'm going to bathe in it. And then like the next page, like the Constructicons form Devastator, and Devastator, like I said before, like it wasn't even in the All Hail Megatron miniseries. It's in the animated movie in 86, and it's in season 1 when Devastator's like too much for even the Dinobots to handle. Devastator emerges here, and he shoots Hound, and then some Joes and Autobots start attacking him, and then like a couple pages later, they seem to have defeated him. So I think where the final 3 issues fizzle for me is there's sort of an inconsistent like scale of power, and like how I want the like power of a human character and the power of a robot character fighting one another, or 2 robots fighting each other, and the ingenuity of the humans to stop it. It sort of thins out. I think the first 3 issues offer more complexity, and there's still some great character stuff. I think Mindbender is great in the final 3 issues. He like mutters to himself that Firefly got away, and he's like upset that he's a captive. The stuff I mentioned about Destro. But I feel like the first 3 issues, it's a little bit more like a comic book, and the second 3 issues, it's a little bit more like episodes of the cartoon.
I had a question about some of the Destro stuff. Starting at the very beginning, didn't Cobra Commander or somebody make a reference about, like, someone pointed them in the direction of the Ark, maybe? Okay, so then they go and they find the Transformers, and then, like, they're trying to reverse engineer the technology, and they make the snake armor suits and stuff. And then Destro comes, and they're trying to sell the Transformers to him? And I was like, well, who tipped him off in the first place? Because I felt like there was a line of dialogue where they made it sound like Destro had told him, yeah, go here, find this, get these things. But then later it was like they were trying to sell stuff to Destro. And I'm like, well, you got that wrong. Destro sells stuff to Cobra, not the other way around. I don't know. There's just some confusion there for me with how it started and where they came from. What, there was a big part in the original A-Raw series where Serpentor had taken over, and it was like all of a sudden his primary focus becomes selling terror drones. And it's like, well, Cobra's not like a marketing thing, they don't sell arms, they use them. That's not. So I was just kind of confused about that.
I will admit, Mark, I'm going to pass this to you. I maybe didn't read the issues quite carefully enough to answer Jay's question about Destro's involvement. Can you handle this one?
Can I?
Anyone? Bueller?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know that I cared enough, to be honest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Page to properly understand it. I don't know that it's really explained.
Page 4 of issue 1, Cobra Commander says, Baroness says, it looks like the arms trafficker was right, Cobra Commander. And Cobra Commander says, that it does, Baroness. Do you have anything to add based on your conversation with the Scotsman?
Okay, so are the arms trafficker and the Scotsman 2 different people?
Destro's Scottish, isn't he?
Yeah.
No, the arms trafficker is Destro.
Then Destro told him to go there.
Yeah.
And find the Autobots and right?
I think the idea here is that because Cobra Commander has Dr. Mindbender, he's doing the initial reverse engineering just as Cobra, and then he's going to either like sell it to Destro or bring Destro in to like do the second pass or to integrate it more into what Mars does. I agree with you that it could maybe be clearer, but I also think some of this is keeping it a little oblique, because it's like, I certainly don't need a zero issue.
Yeah.
Destro is like an archaeologist, and he's like, I found a spaceship, let me tell Cobra Commander. Like, it's enough that like Cobra Commander just finds them.
Yeah, I'm flicking through it, and it's sort of, I guess, the implications of that Cobra, Cobra, the kind of the brains behind the reverse engineering and creating these robots and the snakes and so on. And it's Destro is the arms dealer, and he's got the connections to be able to connect in with the clients who are then willing to actually buy the things. So it's kind of separation, perhaps.
I liked it. Like I said, I don't want anybody to think that I didn't enjoy it. I really did. I liked that. I liked it a lot. Just a couple little dialogue spots that confused me.
One thing that I kind of noticed as I was going through this is that it's kind of pitched as its own separate continuity, and not wedded to anything else. But it very much uses the Devil's Due redesigns, particularly for some of those more recognizable characters like Major Blood, Gung Ho, Flint, even Mindbender to a degree. so it's kind of its own thing, but it's also it's definitely leaning into the Devil's Due continuity in terms of the look. And one thing that I found a little bit interesting or strange was this parallel appearance of Mercer, that almost simultaneously that he's being reintroduced in a couple of panels in the main book to help the Cobra to help G.I. Joe sort of invade Cobra Island. Again, in this one, he's sort of introduced over a couple of panels where he lets in G.I. Joe on a little secret about the Transformers and helping them to get to Cobra Island. Clearly,
I didn't like that.
Clearly, Blaylock has got an itch to scratch about using this character, and he's able to accomplish it in almost exactly the same way twice.
I've got a formatting question, Mark, for you. You've got the hardcover omnibus in front of you. In issue 1, there's the double page splash halfway through where Optimus Prime has transformed and he's holding the Baroness. There's like a yellow sky behind him.
Oh, yes.
Okay. When you turn back one page, on the right side, you see the Baroness and Cobra Commander and then Optimus Prime transforming.
Yep.
What do you see on the left side?
It is one of the planes in robot mode, maybe Starscream, one of the others. Actually, no, it's not. It's the Rattler one. So the Rattler one appears on the prior page to that as a one-page splash. It's a Rattler Decepticon in robot mode up against a jet. One-page splash. Turn the page. Top half of the page. It's then the robot punching that plane.
Okay. Sorry, because I've got the single issues in front of me, and on the left side where Baroness is talking to Cobra Commander and then Optimus Prime is transforming is a full page ad for issue number 2, and in terms of formatting, artists and editors need to keep track of what's on the left page and what's on the right page, because if you have a 2-page splash, and then let's say a single page and then a 2-page splash, that single page either has to get dropped from the collection, which no one does, or you have to insert some kind of like blank or neutral page, because you have to always deal with multiples of 2, left page, right page.
Yeah, there is one. So because they're not doing covers as well, quite often the covers are used as a way of breaking things up or sort of balancing out the pages of a story, but those are all in the back. So they do one interesting thing, which is I think it's the first page of issue number 2. It opens up with quite a big close up of Destro's face with all of the reflections. Is that right, or is that issue 3? Issue 3 opens up with Destro's face with all of these reflections of Soundwave, and it's I don't know if it's entirely successful, but it's quite an ambitious splash page, and quite an interesting image. And
It's kind of busy.
Yeah, it's a bit. It's a difficult one to pull off. It's obviously quite ambitious in terms of the approach. The page on the left of that in the collected edition, what they've done is they essentially repeat a part of that panel. They just to separate out the dialogue. So it says, "How many of them have you completed?" as just a single page.
Interesting.
Whereas
Okay.
I think in the original publication that is just one page. So they've applied it certainly there where it's a little bit more noticeable. But I don't know if they've done similar tricks anywhere else on the.
The reason why I asked is that in issue 1, I mean, as someone who's made comics, sometimes when I see a double page splash, like at the beginning of issue 1, and then just a few pages later, another double page splash, I think, oh no, do they have an even number of pages? In issue 1, I think to sort of even this out, they drop in an ad, which, you can do this in comics, but when you collect it in a collection, you sort of can't. But something that I don't like in the reading experience of these comics is halfway through issue 1, I see the ad for issue 2, which feels like it's jumping the gun. Yeah. Like, no, the ad for issue 2 should be at the end of issue 1, particularly if it has any story elements to it, which this does not. It's just a pinup of Destro and some bad guys. I talk a lot about storytelling, and in the drawings, having the quote camera sort of close enough or far enough so that we can see everything, or if something changes, or if people are in the same space together, we need to see them in the same space together. And there's a moment in issue 3 which I really like, which then a panel later I really don't like. This is page 4. Cobra Commander and Dr. Mindbender are bringing Destro into the lab to see Soundwave, and there are 2 Iron Grenadiers with them. And Destro says, "And the transmission module, it will be ready in time." And Mindbender says, "I can answer that for you, most definitely. After the past months spent reverse engineering alien technology, it was a welcome relief working on something from our world." And we're looking past, up on Soundwave's shoulders, where we see, 2 Cobra techs and a Techno Viper. And then there's a reverse angle. In the next panel, we see this Cobra tech, and he's holding a pen and, a little pad. And then we see Cobra Commander, and he waves his hand, and he says, "Go ahead, lower the platform." And then the next panel, that Cobra tech is sort of welcoming Destro, sort of shaking his hands, and he says, "Do you know how to control the machine?" And then the next panel, Destro says something snide to him. And I was thinking about this page, and there have been many moments in the Devil's Due publishing run in the first 2 years, written by Josh Blaylock, where there's a wordless panel where Blaylock just takes a beat for someone to think or see something, or just a little bit of silent, wordless pantomime. Someone goes in a door, someone's looking at something. And I like that he takes the time to do that, the valuable real estate. I like this moment where this Cobra tech says, but I don't actually understand what he's saying or what he's reacting to. Is he intimidated that Destro is here? Is he nervous because he's behind schedule? No one asked him a question. And the dialogue that immediately precedes this panel of him saying, doesn't lead me to believe, it doesn't connect entirely with this. I'd sort of expect his dialogue to be like, "Oh, we're ready for you, sir. Come on up." But instead he says, So I think Blaylock is doing just some little bit of character business here, which I really like. But it's with a nobody character. It's not with a named Cobra. And it's not even with a tech who's said anything or done anything or got a name before this. So oddly, it's a weird, wasted panel. And then the next panel, which I really like, Cobra Commander is waving his hand and he says, "Go ahead, lower the platform." And I thought, what platform? Because I'm looking on the first panel and I see these 3 Cobra, the 2 techs and a Techno Viper up on Soundwave's shoulders. And I don't when he says platform, does he mean have Soundwave like bend over so we can step up on his shoulders? Or is there some like gantry or a little like elevator? And then I realized in the fourth panel, I think there is a little like gantry elevator. It's this sort of light gray blue thing that is in front of Destro. And I guess he's stepping off it, but it's like, wait, wouldn't Mindbender and the two Iron Grenadiers be on that as well? And so I know this seems like a nitpicking because this is just 2 or 3 or 4 panels on one page, and in general, the scene communicates what it's supposed to. Cobra Commander is showing Destro what they've done. Destro's impressed, and then there's like a newscaster saying something about the alien robots. But Miller needs to like pull the camera back so that we see this little platform that can move up and down in the first panel. And I always like that universal symbol for an edge that you might fall off of, like at the edge of an elevator or at the edge of a subway platform, which are the diagonal yellow and black lines. And if there were just some of those on this like weird cube thing that Destro's not really stepping off of. And then also, while we're here, let me say something nice about Mike S. Miller. On the next page, there's a great panel of Lady J and Flint running down the hallway. Great poses, cameras low, super exciting. But then, the colorists disappoint me because at the bottom of that, then the 2 panels underneath Flint and Lady J, I'm not sure if it's Stalker or Dial Tone. And there's a thing that a lot of colorists do in comics the last like 20 years, which is when they are coloring the skin of Africans or African Americans, they do it with a very light touch. And a lot of black characters in comics, to me, end up looking kind of just like all the white people standing around them with like a little more red in them, or just very, very lightly brown skinned. And I think this is a case where it looks better on a monitor than it does when it's printed. I think colorists can be concerned that if they go too dark, it's going to print too dark, which is a reasonable concern. But other characters have like brown leather jackets and like dark brown hair. And considering that Dial Tone is in this series, and we started with Stalker, I really need to be clear when I see a Joe with a mustache and a beret.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Stalker, when he appeared earlier, had a much thicker mustache, and he didn't have a badge on his beret, so it's entirely possible that it's Dial Tone, but there's not enough signifiers for us to think that it is Dial Tone and not a miscoloured Stalker. So yeah, possibly not a mistake in the way that they intended, but a misstep nonetheless. I wondered about the panel that you were talking with the Cobra technician before as well, whether potentially they've made a last minute revise. What's the word? Revisation? That's not a word, is it? Revision. I wondered whether it might be a last minute revision, and that previously Cobra Commander might have been asking him a question where the might have made more sense, and they've changed that bit of dialogue without changing then the following piece. But purely speculation. Who knows?
My final comment, it's 2 items on the final page of the whole story. I know I've already covered this, that I wish the Autobots and Decepticons had a few more sort of color, if not like shape signifiers when they're in robot mode. But every time I see Starscream in this miniseries, I think, oh cool, Skywarp is here. Because sort of the rules of Transformers are that Starscream is like gray and red and blue, and Skywarp is mostly black. And I keep seeing this Night Raven Starscream in this story, and he's like all dark gray or black. And this happens even on the final panel where I'm like, oh, what's Cobra Commander doing with Skywarp? Oh, right. He got away with Starscream. The final 2 panels of this remind me indirectly of the final page of the Marvel G.I. Joe and the Transformers crossover from 86-87. That story has a love interest for Hawk, which doesn't really work. And I forget, she's like a government liaison. And I think she's sort of against the robots in the story. I can't quite remember. But for having a government person who's separate than the Joes, have some like emotional beat and like wrapping up the story on the final page of that crossover. Even though I don't love that character, we've known who she is. She's been a specific character for all 4 issues. Even if she's a new character for that story, we never see her again. The ending to this story, the final 2 panels, is 3 panels, excuse me, is like an elevator and then a big reveal of a room underground in New Mexico and scientists working on disassembled Soundwave, and then a scientist looking at a schematic. And, clearly this is promising more story. And this is sort of a bookend to that Cobra technician I was just talking about who says, where Josh Blaylock takes a whole panel, which, considering how crowded the story is a good amount of real estate, and has a non-entity character, a Cobra who we don't know, who doesn't get a name, who doesn't do anything, do something, right? He says, And yet here, this room full of scientists, it's not scientists that we've met before. We don't have a close-up of any of their faces. None of them get named. And that's fair. I think if any of them got named now, it would be confusing. And if we had a close-up of one and he had like a mustache, it'd be like, wait, is this a specific person? Should I know who this is? But at this point, in the final 3 panels of the story, since it's just a nebulous government question, cadre of scientists who have like taken over the reverse engineering, I feel like it's a missed opportunity. And, those 2 generals who showed up in issue 4, who were like, we're taking over now, Hawk, or the president, who shows up in, I forget, issue 4 or 5. I feel like this final scene needs someone specific who had appeared earlier in the comic, so that we can feel more of an emotional investment in this lingering story thread that, no, this isn't over, and the bad US government is going to make more of these robots and do something interesting or bad.
Playing devil's advocate on that one, I guess it's playing into the kind of the Area 51 piece, of conspiracy theories, which they have sort of talked about, through this series, and playing again into the part of the issue earlier where they wanted to cut off those couple of Autobots that they were working with and deconstruct them for their own nefarious means. So it's not coming entirely out of nowhere, and kind of having that kind of almost anonymous, secretive part of the government, and having it completely, nondescript and non-named, maybe works into that kind of idea that, they are faceless, nameless, grey bit of the government that you don't know what's happening. At the very last panel, it says construction 29% complete on Megatron, and maybe I've missed something, but the last time we saw him, he was pretty much intact, and he was just given a big slap in the face by Optimus Prime. So I don't know why he's now only 29% when, I guess, building him a new model.
I took that to mean they're making more Megatrons, but I agree it's a little confusing.
Okay, should we look into I Spy?
I spy with my little eye.
There's a couple things I want to try to point out. Actually, just one, maybe. Design-wise. Look at number 3. I think it's like page 5, where Soundwave and you got some Cobras are flying in. I love the slight redesign of the Trouble Bubble.
I didn't even notice it was any different, Jay.
Doesn't it look a little bit like the front of it looks like almost more sled? Like the driver is more of a kind of a leaned back position. It looks slightly different than original. And I just, when I turned to that page, I was like, oh wow, that's such a neat, like I said, it's just a very slight redesign to me, but I thought that was really neat the way that they did that. As far as like other little bits of things, obviously when the Joes are in the transport in the beginning, I think Stalker maybe is sitting in front of a crate that says Arbco Industries on it, and that's putting that right out there. And it's not much of an I Spy when it's so big and prominent in the panel. Yeah, so I mean, and you know, when you got a thing like this, it's probably going to be full of I Spies, little tiny details that, like you said, the somebody higher up said, "Oh, you need to put this in. You need to put this in," even if it doesn't make any sense. You know, so that's what we end up with.
I spy a roster of soldiers that General Flagg is looking at to join the G.I. Joe team, and it includes Spike Witwicky with the code name Spike.
Oh, where is this?
Is maybe
what chapter?
Chapter 1-ish, chapter 2, just when he's talking to Hawk about forming the Joe crew. Let me see, it's maybe...
Oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah, there's a panel with a list of names. Doc, Gung-Ho, Sci-Fi, Snake Eyes, Lifeline, Duke, Clutch, Leatherneck, Quick, Barbecue, Stalker, and yeah, sorry, not Duke, Spike. That is, it's got KE stands, but then the file name across it from it is Spike Wiki.
Cool.
I spy a callback to the original Marvel crossover, where in issue the callback is in issue 3, and it's putting us in mind of Bumblebee being destroyed by the G.I. Joe team when rather unceremoniously when they first encounter him. It's a bit of a case of, he's coming right for us, fire, and there's Bumblebee being destroyed, whereas in this case he has a missile shot at him and is able to catch it instead. Yeah, they say, we don't have time for this, enemy refuses to cooperate, fire, no, grab. So yeah, putting it in mind, but yeah, Bumblebee is not written off this time around.
I own the original arts to the page where they kill Bumblebee in the original miniseries, and it's interesting and a little upsetting. I've never liked that scene. It's fun to own the art, but it's like, come on, guys, don't rush into
crossovers.
this.
There's normally that bit of confusion where they accidentally start fighting and then they realize they're on the same side after all. But yeah, it doesn't normally involve the killing of one of the main heroes.
Yeah, I have an I Spy. Mercer spits after he appears, which is a visual callback to him spitting on a scorpion in the 1987 animated G.I. Joe, the movie. And just as Megatron has his fancy glowing purple weapon as a hand replacement, which is a callback to the three first episodes of the 1984 cartoon. Megatron's line also at the beginning of issue 1 here, when he wakes up and sees Cobra Commander, he says, "I still function." That's a throwback to the animated movie when he meets Unicron. And I think as a general rule, this kind of reference should, I think we should hold off on these. I think these stories, like the live action movie, the first Michael Bay movie, when Prime and Megatron are fighting and Prime says, "One shall stand, one shall fall." It's like, oh, I know that line. It's in that other Transformers the movie that I've seen 45 times in my life. It's like, like if you're going to do it, this should be incredibly subtle. Like, this is not quite the same thing, but in a previous episode of this podcast, we talked about issue 283 of A Real American Hero, where a character shows up for the first time since 1987, who was in Special Missions number 4. And I had just forgotten, right? Like, if you're going to do a callback, be subtle or do a deep cut, as opposed to like Prime's most famous line or like, this iconic line. I think it's fun, but it ends up being a little distracting. And, I don't want this crossover to remind me of other G.I. Joe and Transformers stories. I want it to be its own thing.
I spy Starscream and Cobra Commander in the same scene, which, if we were to imagine this as a cartoon, would have both of the characters voiced by the same voice actor, Chris Latta.
That's good. I spy in issue 4 one of the I think it's one of the generals, Frankel, Frankel, Nkel. And there was a Hasbro employee in the middle 2000s named Andrew Frankel, who worked on Transformers. I think he's in the credits of, was it Robots in Disguise? Was that the show from Japan that was on in 2001? I'm such a big Transformers fan that I get the shows. I should get the shows mixed up because now there's so many that they've repeated the titles. But there are also a couple other names of specific generals who show up in this story who don't jump out at me as Easter eggs. So I thought this one is probably that person, but maybe they're all just
and
random
there's
names.
One of them is called Renegar or something like that, which is the same name as the Renegar variant for G.I. Joe issue, I think it was 21, the one by Mike Turner, and it's an unusual word. So I wonder if, maybe one to see if we can ask about down the line with our mystery guest.
I have an error detected for issue number 4. There are 2 word balloons that are out of order. That's pretty small. In issue 6, there's a Cobra soldier who's colored green, not blue.
I've got a nice petty one which isn't too far off of yours or two, which is a your and your error, YOU apostrophe RE versus YOUR. Your attack on the SDS center is a bit of lying in of dialogue in it. I don't know. I'm a bit pedantic about that, and that just gives me a little bit of a makes me feel a little queasy when that's happening.
One of the comments that I wanted to make is that in a previous episode we were sort of comparing the final Josh Blaylock arc, issues 22 through 25, to the first Josh Blaylock arc, because they both have a lot going on and high stakes and sort of a big battle. And it seems that Blaylock got better in the 2 years. And similarly, here is a big, crowded Blaylock story with really high stakes that comes at the end of his 2 years. And I don't think there are a lot of comparisons to be made between this crossover miniseries and that first arc. But on page 5, and this is not a Josh Blaylock thing. This is a Dreamer design thing. 2 years later, in the final panel of page 5 of issue 1, Cobra Commander has 3 word balloons, and for some reason, halfway through the middle one, the eyes, the letter I, just have serifs. And in looking at the second,
then prepare charges to seal the cabin entrance. I want it to look like this ship was never here, and neither were we.
The second half of that dialogue looks oddly cramped, and I think that's like a fix. They left a word out, and then they had to cram in other words or a rewrite. And whoever did that fix, whatever the button in Photoshop is to turn off eyes with serifs, unless it's the word I by itself, that button did not get clicked. And I was both disappointed to see this, because I thought Dreamer Design had learned by now, but also sort of enchanted, because, we can bookend the beginning of the Devil's Due run and the Josh Blaylock era with the end of the Josh Blaylock era and a sort of a mirror mistake.
Okay, favorite line of dialogue. Have you got one?
I can't think that I've got a favorite line of dialogue, really.
It's the one that I did at the beginning when I talked about sort of the scale of this, when it's in issue 1, his tanks have unloaded, and Stalker says, "We're not equipped for this. We need heavy support fast." It's the first half of that. We're not equipped for this. That is symbolic of this new continuity where it's an origin sort of for all the groups meeting for the first time and us meeting them for the first time. It's like, oh, okay, well, the Joes are going to have to get their own Transformers, or I hope they meet some Transformers.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a favorite line of dialogue, but I do have a least favorite line of dialogue. So I'm going to recycle your jingle, Tim.
Wait, did I sing something? Did I make something up?
You did.
Mark, dialogue, Mark. Mark doesn't like all the dialogue. Here's some words that Mark didn't like. Also, apostrophes in your.
So, my least favourite line of dialogue. The authentication is genuine, Mr. Mitchell. No matter how many times I double check it. If you double check it, you are checking it twice. If you
should he should
if you're checking it 3 times, you're triple checking it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I've double checked it 5 times. Okay. So shall we do some Joeyage scoring? I can't believe I've never done a jingle for this, by the way. It's
1, 10, 6, 8. What are the points you give to Joe? It's a story that you like, unless you don't. It's a story. Something like that. That's just a rough. Maybe you can enhance that with some music.
Yeah.
And some
2,
rewriting.
4, 6, 8. Which Joes do we appreciate? No, I don't know. Well, let's workshop it. Okay, so yeah, I think my sort of viewpoint hasn't changed too much since the beginning. The art is okay, but not great. The colouring is distracting. I don't feel invested in these characters or continuity. The Transformers transforming into G.I. Joe vehicles is cool, but ultimately the story is a little bit flat and too many characters are introduced and sort of I lose interest overall. So it's fine and functional, but not great. I think I am giving it a 4.
Wow. I think the first 3 issues would get a 6 from me. Things are less exciting and dramatic in the final 3 issues, and I think the art is good, and I think compared to a lot of Devils do art, I think the art is pretty great. And Miller, man, has a tall order, drawing a lot of big and small characters, very particular costumes and designs, and it's a crowded story. But some of his storytelling could be more dramatic, lowering those horizon lines. I agree. I don't love the coloring, but I'm much more willing to give this leeway in terms of Blaylock trying something new, or like making it just much more of the animated continuity, as opposed to the comic, which is clearly picking up from the Marvel continuity. I think I'm much harder on that because the stakes are higher for me. But, once you have the sort of, quote, realistic Joes and the not realistic alien robots from millions of years ago, there's a lot more leeway to be goofy or go crazy or be more sort of soft sci-fi. So I give this a 5, which isn't very high, but I still enjoyed it.
Okay, fair enough.
Overall, I enjoyed this. It was the decision to make it its own kind of merged continuity was interesting. I think that it freed them to do a lot of things that they couldn't do otherwise. Like we talked about with the other, the 4 issue, the original Marvel one was done, was almost not referenced at all ever by anyone. So you're like, well, you got these issues. Do the Transformers exist in this continuity? Do they work together? Do they interact here? Yes, right from the beginning, boom, it works. It is what it is. Like I said, I liked it. I liked it better than the Marvel one, probably. I thought the art was better. It was more machines and everything looked better. A little more modern. Overall, I liked it. I'm looking forward to the second part of it.
So what's your Joeyage score?
Oh, I'm gonna give it a 7.5, 7.5.
Oh, quite high. Quite high.
Yeah, it doesn't deserve an 8, but it's definitely more than a 6 for me. And again, it's kind of like with the main series with the Bad O issues. The good art makes a not great story much more palatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, The remaining question was what would be your level of excitement to reading series 2, do you think?
Oh, this is a good question. So I didn't read it at the time because I remember I think where I lose interest is at the end of issue 6 here, where there's a panel where the Joes now have sort of their own giant robots that look like giant robot suits based on like the snake armor, but they're like designed and colored as if each one is a specific Joe. And at this point, it's like, okay, I want G.I. Joe to be a G.I. Joe. I want Transformers to be Transformers. If they meet, I think we can do it once. But if they mix a lot, then it's like Mask. And I want Mask to be Mask. I don't want G.I. Joe to be Mask. And I remember that I think there's a cover for the third crossover where Hawk is holding the Matrix like on Cybertron, and it's like cool. Also, like no, I don't. It's just sort of too much and too deep now. As long as there's still a monthly Transformers comic and a monthly G.I. Joe comic, heck, you could have a like deep dive, bonkers, ongoing crossover comic. Not even a 6-issue mini and a 6-issue mini and a 6-issue mini, but these brands are such specific things to me in their different incarnations. It's sort of like it's like the Porsche SUV. I think Porsches should be Porsches, and the Ferrari SUV. I think Porsches should be Porsches, and SUVs should be SUVs. And when you have a Porsche SUV, it's not a special Porsche anymore, and it's sort of not quite an SUV. Mm-hmm. So, for purposes of this podcast, will I read the second crossover and talk about it? Absolutely. Did I buy it at the time and read it? No. Yeah,
I got to say, as lukewarm as I've given the review for this overall, when I got to that chapter break in the omnibus, I was tempted to keep on reading. Not tempted enough that I actually did. So I don't know if I'll scratch that urge immediately. But I'm not against the idea at all of reading the next one. I certainly hope to be pleasantly surprised. So doors not closed.
That's a good phrase to end that idea on. Hope to be pleasantly surprised, because at this point, it's like, well, the original Marvel one and the later Marvel one, they're not a lot of fun. They're sort of weird. So every time a publisher comes back to try this, it's like, well, this might be the one, that like does something so different, like the first Dreamwave one, which takes place during World War II, which is so strange and wonderful. Although it has some problems.
We should definitely try and do that one as a special at some point. From it in.
Cool. Yeah. I have those issues from when they came out.
I've got 2 pages of original art from it, actually.
Nice.
Very good.
This is how the story goes. Attention. At this moment, you are now listening to
Talking innuendo.
If you are offended by words like
sucking, flesh wound, willy, Pete, balls, crystal balls, hypno shield,
whatever, take the tape out now. This is not a pop album. And by the way, suck my
grandmother's brick in a Prada handbag.
Time now for some innuendo, and it's a Transformers special.
Oh.
So if you're in the right frame of mind, and specifically my frame of mind, a lot of Transformers names can sound pretty dirty. So I've come up with a list of 10 Transformer names, and I'm going to get through all 10 and see how many laughs I can generate. Okay, here we go. Both mics on, and we'll start. Hot Rod.
Ding, one. That was my first one. As soon as you said there's a lot of Transformers names, that was what popped into my head, and I thought, I want to blurt out Hot
I wanted
Rod,
to surprise you with this, because otherwise
right
you might steal yourself ready for them. Okay. Jazz. Headmasters.
I can just keep laughing now.
You know, they don't call them headmasters anymore. They call them power masters now.
That's so much better.
Sideswipe. He's always on Tinder, that guy. Cup. Blue Streak.
Cup is short for pickup truck, believe it or not. Sorry, I talked over your next one.
Blue Streak.
Good one.
Sea Spray. Slag. Does that mean the same in the US as it does in the UK?
Yeah, should you tell our American listeners what slag means?
Don't know, yeah.
It's like, I'll put it in a sentence. Shut it, you slag. It's a derogatory term applied to women who may be slightly too forthcoming with their affections, let's say.
Oh.
Okay, here we go. 2 more. Thrust.
I'm smiling, but not laughing for thrust.
And last but not least, RC. Oh, nothing for that. That was my grand finale.
I think you should have ended with thrust.
Yeah, or hot rod.
It
was so funny though. You said hot rod was your very first one because that was the very first thing that popped into my head was hot rod. I'm like, it's got rod in the name. Come on.
See, I think I was about 7 out of 10 for that, maybe.
There are some good ones. And now you've got the whole property in front of you, whereas with Joe, you've handpicked the good ones. So Mark's going to want to do more Transformers crossovers just for that.
I think I've used the best ones now already. I was not holding any in reserve.
You haven't used Missile Master yet.
Now you.
I think he's a Micromaster. I think he's from 90, 91, forget.
Yeah, Micromaster's quite a good one. Okay. Right. Okay, so
Toy
next
designers
time.
gotta love us.
Next time on Talking Joe Disavowed, we will have an extra special surprise episode, so stay tuned for that. And then after that, we will return for G.I. Joe Frontline. The very first arc, issues 1 to 4, with returning hero Larry Hama. Back on the regular show, we will continue to be covering the ARA issues as they come out. The exciting new arc, Murder by Assassination, continues with artist Andrew Griffiths. In between that, we will also have bonus shows like the sketchbook shows. If you have not checked out our most recent one with Chuck Costas, please head on over to YouTube or stand by for the audio version of this of the show on the normal audio platforms. Quite a sensational collection there. Really enjoyed that. Where can people find you guys, Jay?
Break Room Sketches on Facebook.
And Tim, I'm not forgetting. Almost on my mind. Where can people find you? Go on. Don't let me interrupt.
A real
Whenever you're ready.
Wow. A real
Sorry, Tim.
American. Wow. Missile Master. MissileMaster.com.
I want Tim to do a combined blog that's called A Real American Book That's More Than Meets the Eye.com.
Someday I'll do something with the Transformers interviews.
It's catchy.
It has all of it.
I don't know if you should say that out loud on the podcast. Someone's going to nick that name.
It's a little long.
My website for our listeners is arealamericanbook.com. You can also find me at A Real American Book on Instagram and Facebook.
Very good. You can find out more about this show on the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that has them. Facebook, where if you've not yet joined, please do. Lots of good discussion over there. Talking Joe on Twitter, Instagram, and our email contact details are on the website too. And if you've been a regular listener and haven't reached out and said hello, please feel free to. It's always nice to hear from listeners. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/talkingjoe. A big thanks to all of our backers: Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, Justin, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content.
Nice.
But when all is said and done, you can catch us down the road.
Because we've been Talking Joe.
And we're all out of Joes.
And Transformers.
And we're more than meets the eye. Da-na-na-na-na.
Laters.
And hopefully I can go get back to sleep for a couple hours and lather, rinse, repeat.
Thanks for sharing.
Life is work, sleep, and G.I. Joe, basically.